So hello, today I'm at All Saints Church in Terling in Essex, and I'd like to talk to you about the memorials inside and the families connected to them, which played a great part in this village. When I start researching a name such as William Rochester, you never know where it will lead you. Well, I found out the following. William was born here in Terling in 1505. His father was Robert Rochester, who had many sons, and what interesting but troubled lives they led. John Rochester was the third son, and he was Cambridge educated and would join the Carthusians of London as a choir monk. He would oppose the Act of Supremacy of King Henry VIII and would be arrested and sent to York, where on the 11th of May 1537 he was hanged. Afterwards, his body was manacled in chains until it fell to pieces from the battlements of York Castle. In 1886, Pope Leo XIII beautified John Rochester. Now, John's eldest brother, Sir Robert Rochester of 1557, was a zealous Catholic and loyal to the Princess Mary Tudor. Refusing to interfere with her private devotions in Mass, Robert was sent to the Tower of London, where when Princess Mary became Queen Mary I of England, Robert would enter the Inner Privy Council and was knighted. He would represent Essex itself. Now, Sir Robert would never marry, as 1/3 of his lands would pass on to William Rochester, whose tomb we will look at in a minute. Now, when Sir Robert was alive, he made a provision for the chantry here where we stand at Terling. For it was the Rochester family that built the south aisle where we stand now. That's almost 500 years later. Now the Rochester tombs are all tucked into or underneath and to the side of this organ from London. And they've actually built the organ around the tomb, or one of the tombs on the floor. This effigy shows William Rochester kneeling in civil dress. You can see the Bibles or the prayer books on the table. And his wife Elizabeth Newton and their 6 sons and 4 daughters. We can just pan over, we can see the 4 daughters. Wear dresses just like their mother, basically. And if we pan over, we can see the sons. 6 of them. We can see the coat of arms. This would be William. The Rochester coat of arms. And the Newton coat of arms for Elizabeth's family. And underneath is the text. And if you look, you can see the words Terling and Rochester. and William there. And at the bottom it looks like something's been removed, I'm not sure what, on both sides. Now if we pan over we can see the next memorial. Now one of William's 6 sons would be John Rochester, who was born in 1556. And it would be 2 years before his father would die. Now if you look, it shows him with his wife Philippa Wheatley. And again there's a table with 2 prayer books. And their 3 sons and 7 daughters. I always think these mothers are just incredible. I mean, 10 children, it's quite incredible. Now, what's interesting in this memorial is to the right side we have his second wife, Joan Starkley. For Joan was the widow of William Powell and their 2 children, Robert and Mary. So now John's got a total of 12 children. And you will notice there are 3 family crests. This is the Wheatley, the Rochester, and the Starkey. And again writing underneath. A lot more hard to decipher on this text. You can make out Sir Rochester. And in the right corner, right at the bottom, 1584. You can just about make it out. But if I took the light away, it's very difficult to see. It looks like a 1384. Now at the base we've got the last effigy in brass, and I'm not 100% sure exactly who these are, so I'm not going to guess. But it does look like an earlier period, especially the armour. Now I did find a Robert Rochester, born in 1450 and died 1508, of Terling, with his wife Elizabeth, and originally they had 18 children. Now Robert was a comptroller to the Earl of Oxford, a royal household official who supervises expenditure. Could be him. Let's have a look closely. So you can clearly see this is not a Tudor or Elizabethan at least. Could be connected to the 100 Years' War perhaps. It's intriguing how these capture the period dress. Now it looks like a brass rubbing has been done some while back, and it gives you an idea how they would have looked. Now, if you would like to see some life-size stone effigies from that period, I recommend going to Little Dunmow Church, which is St Mary the Virgin, and you can gain access to it by getting the key, and there's instructions on the door. That's most interesting. So now we're just going to have a look in the West Tower, or under the West Tower, because there's some memorials on the wall which I'd like to show you. Now, around 1730, the original 13th century West Tower collapsed, and they rebuilt this tower in 1732. And I've noticed on the wall, these memorials are all from 1732. I can't tell you what happened, but what I can say is that something happened in May of that year. Now we're going to move on to our next family. Just wanted to show you that we have the vicars and the patrons. So the patrons basically support the church and have a huge amount of influence over it. So if we go through the centuries, you can see the Bishop of Norwich, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the May family, G. Knott, and then we come down to Strutt. J. Strutt Esquire, I believe is Joseph Strutt. And that's the family we're going to concentrate on next. They then turn into the Rayleigh family, which I'll explain. And we carry on. If you look at the Rayleighs, until this present day. You will see and hear much of the Strutt family in the history of Terling. Now, John Strutt was an MP for Malden, a wealthy landowner, owning 6,000 acres, mostly around Terling. In 1816, aged 89, Strutt returned from the city of Bath in England, where he was convalescing. And he would die, and he was brought back to Terling, and he's buried in the family vault, just a few metres from where I sit. Now, it would be John Strutt who, in 1761, would purchase Terling's Palace, once home to bishops and kings. King Henry VIII himself owned it for 2 years. And 11 years later, he would level it, demolish it, and then he would build what we have today, which is called Terling's Place, which is a Georgian mansion. And this would become the family seat of the Baron Rayleigh. Now, John himself was the son of a successful miller. He would become an apprentice to his uncle in Malden, it's not so far from here, and soon would reinvest his inheritance into purchasing farmland around Terling. He was described as being a progressive farmer. Now the the Strutt family were unusual. On rent collection day, the Strutts would invite the tenants around. The following is an eyewitness account. Gives them an elegant dinner, plenty of wine, punch, and we dined in a fine larger room. 50 in number, Mrs. Strutt and one son at one table, and Mr. Strutt and the other son at the other table. A sight pleased me much. We spent a cheerful day, 1st of January, 1784. Now, it was also said that John Strutt would defy the latest fashion and walk around Terling wearing a pigtail from an earlier period. John's successor was John Holden Strutt, and he too became an MP for Malden. And when he married Lady Charlotte Gertrude, the daughter of a duke, she became Baroness Rayleigh in 1821. And it is this title that passes to John's son James, and so the Strutts became the Rayleighs. But now we shall start with the third Baron Rayleigh. So John William Strutt, he was called. Born in 1842, died in 1919. He was born in Malden and he was educated in Eton College and Trinity College, Cambridge. And he became a physics professor at University Cambridge. And Professor of Natural Philosophy at the Royal Institution of Great Britain. Now, Professor John William Strutt would make an incredible 54 discoveries, many titled Rayleigh after the barony. I shall now read you some of these discoveries. Discovered include argon gas, fluid instability, surface acoustics and seismic waves in earthquakes, thermoacoustic combustion used in rocket engine components, statistical models in wireless devices, ferromagnetic in magnetic fields, anti-reflective coating used today in cameras, telescopes, glasses, even this phone I'm using now, ultrasound spectroscopy, pronunciation, X-ray in pregnant mothers, and so many more I couldn't even explain them. Now, John William Strutt received the Nobel Prize in Physics. He also had a lunar crater and an asteroid named after him. Now, that's not bad going, is it? On the large estate here, he would leave the entire management to his younger brother so he could concentrate on his science. His personal life, John Strutt would marry Evelyn, the sister of the future Prime Minister, Balfour. They would have 3 sons. Now we move on to the 4th Baron Rayleigh, Robert John Strutt, born 1875, died 1947. He was born here in Terling, educated at Eton College and Trinity College, Cambridge. Robert Strutt became a physicist, measuring the radium and helium content in rocks. By 1908, he was professor at Imperial College London. By 1910, Strutt had discovered nitrogen gas produced active nitrogen, and by 1916, and this is a big one, Strutt discovered the existence of the ozone and the different ozone layers. Now, by 1919, Robert Strutt would resign from Imperial College and work from his private laboratory right here in Terling. Then he would discover the difference between luminosity and the northern lights, and the air glow that prevents the sky ever becoming completely dark. By 1929, Robert Scott had measured the intensity of the night sky. His work is still known as the air glow Rayleigh. An interesting side note, the US Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories acquired his unpublished data. Sir Robert Strutt would marry twice and have 6 children. And I read his wife here was also a missionary for a couple of years in Egypt. She had an interesting life. Next we have the Honourable Charles Richard Strutt, who was born 1910, died in 1981. He was born here in Terling. Educated Trinity College, Cambridge. During World War II, Charles would reach the rank of captain. Interestingly, I discovered Captain Strutt was part of the SOE, the Special Operations Executive, in the Danish section, and was awarded the Danish Pro Diana Medal. Charles would become the governor of Felsted School, which was founded in 1564. Now we have a memorial to Sir Nigel Strutt. Born in 1916, died in 2004. Now Nigel would be educated at Winchester College, then attend Y College, specialising in farming. By 1937, Nigel had moved to Africa and become aide-de-camp to the governor of Rhodesia. And by the start of World War II, Nigel would be a forward observation officer in the Royal Horse Artillery, a seriously dangerous role. Now, by 1941, Nigel Strutt was severely wounded in Libya, losing one eye. Returning to duty in Palestine, he was captured by the German Wehrmacht and became a POW, prisoner of war, in Parma. In 1943, he was exchanged on medical grounds, so Nigel Strutt would become Deputy Lieutenant and High Sheriff of Essex. But it's his farming what he's most known for. Nigel would form an impressive 22,500 acres across Essex and Suffolk, and that works out 91 square kilometres of land. He'd be knighted in 1972. Now moving on to the last Strutt member that I'm going to include, who's called Edward Gerald Strutt, born 1854, died 1930. He was born here in Terling in 1854, educated at Winchester College and Trinity College, Cambridge. His eldest brother and uncle were both physicists. Now, Edward would found Lord Rayleigh's dairy farm, which is famous today, and sell huge quantities of milk to London's milk markets by 1900. During World War I, Edward was involved in maximising food production. Nigel Strutt also revitalised Britain's sugar beet production. He would marry and have 6 children, reaching the good old age of 76. So I hope you enjoyed that. We've talked about the Rochester and the Strutt family. This church is open daily, so please come by and have a look. Thank you very much.